Right then guys, it's PSL here for the 13th episode in my Stewart Manager series on Grand Prix World. Now we've completed 3 races so far this season and we've got a rough idea of the order of performance amongst the teams. You've got teams like Arrows, Tyrrell and Benetton who have surprised me, and then there's teams like Prost, Sauber and even arguably ourselves who are performing below pre-season expectations. Williams are on a par with Minardi. Jacques Villeneuve can barely even beat the Minardi drivers, and the team is, pace-wise at least, in the same position that Tyrrell were last year. I can't say with 100% certainty how Williams have dropped down the order, but I do have a good theory. On the surface, Williams appear to have a decent setup. They have got Jacques Villeneuve and Johnny Herbert, who are both decent race drivers. They've got the Mecha Chrome engine, which yes, is hardly an amazing engine, but it's the same one they used last year, and Benetton are doing just fine with it this year. Exactly the same thing could be said with the tyres, as they've got a works deal with Bridgestone, just like Benetton. Yes, Williams are using Petrobras fuel, which is, no matter which way you cut it, bad. But the fuel they are using doesn't even come close to explaining their crash down the order. The only other element of the car, and a vital one at that, is the chassis. The chassis is probably the single most performance influencing part of a car. Well, on this game at least. Williams should have a chassis which is, you guessed it, equal to Benetton's. Williams' chief designer last season was the 3-star rated Gavin Fisher. Even this year they still have a 3-star rated chief designer. So their chassis should be rated around 60%, but I don't think it is. I've got no way of knowing what its rating is, but since I know most other things about Williams, this one unknown quantity stands out to me as what must be the weak link in the team. What's interesting to note is that the FIA made it legal to run last season's chassis this season. That's what I think Williams have done. I have never run a 1 season old chassis on this game, as it's something you really don't want to do, as Williams here are potentially proving. Anyway, since I have no experience with running a 1-year-old chassis on this game, especially as it's illegal to do most of the time, I have no idea how a 60% but 1-year-old chassis compares to a brand new chassis. But on the face of it, I'd say Williams have the worst chassis on the grid. How did Williams get into this mess? Well, remember after the British Grand Prix last season when Williams fired their technical director Patrick Head? Well, I think that is still having an impact on Williams to this day. I can't imagine why Frank Williams fired him, but Williams went from having a 4-star rated technical director to seemingly no technical director at all. That shouldn't have been as damaging to the team as it has been, as the chassis rating is determined by the chief designer's rating. The technical director has nothing to do with the chassis except for manufacturing it. The tragedy is that I think Gavin Fisher designed a decent chassis for this season, but a leaderless manufacturing department didn't have the organisation, leadership and thus efficiency to manufacture 2 complete chassis in time for this season. If that's true, then Williams may get around to manufacturing this season's chassis at some point this season. Adrian Newey has been with the team since the start of 1999 and he is more than capable of turning this team around. To encapsulate how badly Frank Williams has screwed over his own team, the last time a team ran a 1-year-old chassis in real life F1 was Manor in 2015, and at least Manor had the excuse of entering administration. Williams are a much bigger operation with many more people, including some of the biggest names in the Formula 1 world, and the team is much more generously funded than Manor ever were. I don't know what happened between Williams and Patrick Head, but it has royally harmed Williams. Do you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if the only reason last season's chassis can be run legally this season was to save Williams. Bernie Ecclestone has a good relationship with Frank Williams, so it wouldn't surprise me if Bernie pulled a few strings, just so Williams could legally compete in F1 this season. So that's the big story out of the way, and now I'll shed some light on what happened between 1998 and 1999 and how that influenced this season's running order. I haven't actually talked about how good each team's chassis is this season, which is strange considering how vitally important they are to a team's performance. It's easy to work out the theoretical performance rating of each chassis as it relies on the chief designer each team had last year. So last year Ferrari had Rory Byrne when he was still 5-star rated. So Ferrari should have a 100% rated chassis, and even if not, they should still have the best chassis on the grid by some margin. McLaren had 4-star rated Neil Oatley, so have an 80% rated chassis at best. Benetton, Prost, Sauber and Tyrrell all had 3-star rated chief designers and so have 60% chassis in theory. Tyrrell's decent chassis, I think, is the root of their boost in performance from last season to this season because, on paper, there's no other explanation as to how they moved up from being a backmarker. Williams had a 3-star rated chief designer, but I've already talked about their situation at length. Arrows, Jordan, Minardi and ourselves at Stewart all had 2-star rated chief designers, so have 40% rated chassis. Well, in theory at least, and I know for a fact we don't, as ours is rated 39%. So with the possible exception of Williams and maybe even Minardi, our chassis is the worst on the grid. Certainly, I do have some grounds to believe that our chassis is better than Williams and Minardi's, but none to believe that ours is better than Jordan's, and certainly not better than Arrow's. It may have surprised some of you, least not me, that Arrows only have a 40% rated chassis. It certainly surprises me, as I don't know how Arrows can finish so high up the order with such a lowly rated chassis. Arrows have certainly not got to the front through luck. Well, there has been a dash of luck certainly, but more than that, they have earned their way to the front through good people doing good work and through Tom Walkinshaw making some well thought out decisions that have gone his way, most notably with the engines. Hindsight is 2020, but Ford was certainly a good engine supplier to be with for this season. Yes, I know I left them for Ferrari, which isn't necessarily a bad move, but for this season at least it was. Ford and Mercedes made the biggest step forwards with their engines because they have a 5 out of 5 rated R&D department. The R&D stat of each supplier gives you an indication as to how much a supplier can, but not necessarily will, improve from season to season. So Mercedes can theoretically produce a bad engine, but with a maximum rated R&D department, along with the fact they start with the best engine in the game, it is unlikely that they will produce a bad engine, certainly for a while at least. Ferrari's step forward from last season was smaller because they only have a 4 out of 5 rated R&D department. Again, that doesn't mean that Ferrari are incapable of producing an engine better than Mercedes, it simply means that Mercedes have the greater resources and so are more likely to produce a better engine. Peugeot are only rated 3 out of 5 on the R&D front, so are even less likely to produce a top tier engine. But considering how well rounded their engine is this season, they've shown that again, even with a lesser rated research and development department, suppliers can still do better than you would expect. Mugen Honda and Mechachrome both made small steps forward, which isn't surprising considering they both only have 2 out of 5 rated R&D departments. Mugen Honda did improve their engine more than Mechachrome did, which could just be through luck or maybe through their greater level of cash. I don't know what the cash stat for suppliers determines, as it could have an impact on development, hence how Mugen Honda were able to develop their engine more so than Mechachrome were, or maybe it just references the deals they can offer. In other words, the higher the cash value, the more money they'll give you on a works deal, or even the more money they'll give you on a partner deal, assuming you can negotiate a financial bonus. But I don't think that's what it is, because considering Ford have one level of cash less than Mugen Honda and can supply one extra team and fund a works deal which Mugen Honda can't, it only makes sense for the cash stat to determine the level of improvement and development from season to season. If that's the case, then that makes it even more impressive that Ford made such a huge step forward with significantly less cash to spend than both Mercedes and Ferrari. Anyway, I definitely covered the R&D stat above the cash stat, which is part of the reason I went with Goodyear and not Bridgestone for my tyres. Goodyear have slightly less cash than Bridgestone, but a better R&D department. I wouldn't think too much about it anyway, because the tyre war is the most random and hard to predict of all the tech wars in this game. Also, if you wondered why the tyres are so much better this year, well, that's because Bridgestone and Goodyear were instructed by the FIA to make their tyres better. Lastly, the fuel suppliers were made to downgrade their fuels for this season, which explains the almost universal drop in fuel performance stats. Elf were the only supplier to better their fuel this season, and that's due to them having a 5 out of 5 R&D department. Elf perfectly summarised just how important having a supplier with a highly rated research and development department is. Jean Todt and Tom Walkinshaw recognised that fact and struck a deal with Elf. The rest of us didn't. Even the top fuel suppliers weren't able to better their fuel from last season to this season, but if you do strike a deal with those top suppliers and get the R&D bonus, then you can rapidly improve your fuel, whereas Elf don't offer works deals. So Ferrari, and especially Arrows, are at the mercy of what Elf can do by themselves. Mobil and Texaco are the only suppliers to produce fuels of an equal quality to last year. The other suppliers are supplying a lower quality fuel, including Shell. You see, Shell have 3 out of 5 R&D like Texaco, but Shell did a worse job at developing fuel for this year. Shell even have more cash than Texaco, which shows the development race amongst the engine, tyre and fuel suppliers isn't easy to predict. You just pin your hopes with a supplier who has good ratings, try and get the best deal possible with that supplier and hope they deliver for you. Long and short of it, Arrows were smart with who they signed deals with. Tom Walkinshaw targeted suppliers who have highly rated research and development departments. Those suppliers weren't guaranteed to deliver top quality components, but it was a calculated decision that maximised Arrow's odds of getting top tier parts. And Tom Walkinshaw knew he could strike a deal with Ford, and especially with the underdog fuel supplier of Elf. I still don't know how Arrows are as quick as they are with only a 40% rated chassis, but certainly Tom Walkinshaw has pulled off something truly special. And with all of that said, let's see if Arrows are still a top flight team, and let's see if there's been any major changes to the pecking order as we start the 4th Grand Prix of the season. It's the first round of the season in Europe, and more specifically, it's at Imola. So it's forecast to be a dry qualifying session here in San Marino. And as you can see, we have still got a level 1 driver aid, a level 1 active suspension driver aid, which hopefully will help us out here in qualifying. And it hasn't, and actually, Takaki has beaten his teammate Pedro Diniz in qualifying. But even still, our drivers have qualified down in 17th and 18th. Both Williams drivers have beaten both Minardi drivers, which is, well, it is impressive, but it shouldn't be. That's the really tragic thing, is I'm saying that it's impressive. That Jacques Villeneuve has beaten Jarno Trulli in a Minardi by 0.02 of a second. That shouldn't be impressive, but it is. Anyway, moving back up towards the front, we have got on pole position Michael Schumacher, no surprise there, but Alexander Wurz in the Arrows is just behind in second. Then you've got Damon Hill in the McLaren in third, Fisichella, the other Ferrari driver, in fourth, David Coulthard in the other McLaren is in fifth, and then you've got both Benetton drivers led by Eddie Irvine. Then you've got Emmanuel Collard in the Sauber. Now that is pretty impressive, because Sauber so far this season, they haven't really made much of an impact. They haven't scored a point so far this season. Sauber are running Mercedes engines, let's not forget. The three Mercedes powered teams this season are McLaren, Prost and Sauber. And bearing in mind, both Sauber and Prost have got the most powerful engine on the grid, the best engine right now in Formula 1. Those two teams have really underperformed with it. I really am not fancying our prospects for this Grand Prix. In fact, I think to a large extent this season is going to be a write-off for us. We just have to take the rough with the smooth, and until we get this season's chassis upgraded, we have got next to no hope of scoring points. And I think I'm correct in saying that our best performances last season, generally speaking, came not long after we upgraded our current chassis, well, our current chassis at the time. Because I think not long after we upgraded our chassis, I think other teams brought in upgrades, possibly improved their chassis. So by upgrading our current chassis as soon as possible, hopefully we can get a big performance boost before the other teams do. Hopefully. That's all I'm banking on, because aside from that, this season just really doesn't look promising for us. Heinz-Harald Frentzen has won the 1999 San Marino Grand Prix in a Benetton. He beat Michael Schumacher by 1.3 seconds. Then you've got Damon Hill in third, Fisichella fourth. Eddie Irvine was 36 seconds behind his teammate. In fact, actually, exactly 36 seconds, to the thousandth of a second, he was exactly 36 seconds behind Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Then you've got Jean Alesi scoring yet another point for Jordan. Meanwhile, Arrows didn't score a single point. Jan Magnussen nearly did, but he finished down in seventh, half a second behind Jean Alesi. Presumably, Alexander Wurz must have retired because, well, we're not seeing him anywhere. Certainly, Hakkinen, Alberto Marini, our two drivers, they're all ahead of Alexander Wurz, so presumably Wurz retired. Villeneuve and Herbert, both Williams drivers, beat both Minardi drivers. Montoya out with a clutch issue. Collard out. Collard did well in qualifying, but he's out of the Grand Prix prematurely due to an accident. Shinji Nakano made a driver mistake, and then you've got Wurz out with an engine issue, and that is a Ford engine. Now we know that the Ford engine is very good in pretty much every aspect, apart from reliability. Reliability is the one weak link with the Ford engine and has let Wurz down. And then you've got David Coulthard out with a brakes issue. Coulthard really didn't have the best San Marino Grand Prix. In the Drivers' Championship, Damon Hill is now leading the way with Michael Schumacher only 2 points back, Wurz only 3 points back, and the most recent race winner, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, is only 4 points back. David Coulthard didn't even finish this Grand Prix, yet he's still only a race win behind his teammate and championship leader. Then you've got Irvine in 6th, and you've got Fisichella, Alesi, who's really done well so far this season, and Jan Magnussen, who are all on 5 points. In the Constructors' Championship, McLaren are leading the way, Benetton only 6 points back. It is an incredibly close battle in the Constructors' Championship. McLaren, Benetton, Ferrari and Arrows, in that order, are separated by 8 points. 8 points separating the top 4 teams, and Arrows are one of those top 4 teams and Williams aren't. Even still, we have got a very, very tasty battle in the Constructors' Championship. Benetton, I thought, weren't going to have the pace because I think in the past Grand Prix, the past 2 Grand Prix, they weren't quite on the same level as McLaren or Arrows, but Arrows plainly don't have the reliability, well, the Ford engine doesn't, Benetton do, in fact, actually, I think that is one of the Mechachrome's strengths, is reliability. Contrasting approaches, but right now, there's only 2 points separating Benetton Mechachrome and Arrows Ford. I've been waiting for this to happen for some time, and that is one of the staff members I fired. I think it was an average employee, which I got rid of to get in a good employee. They have successfully sued me for unfair dismissal. Now, I've been waiting for this to happen for some time because, whilst it isn't common, it does happen. So yes, $40,000 I've had to pay for unfair dismissal, which is fair, although I don't really understand how it all works, because every time you get rid of a staff member, you pay them a redundancy package. But technically you're not making them redundant, are you? Unless you want to argue that by getting rid of an average employee to get in a good employee, then it's not the same job because it's on a different skill level, which is a bit dubious. Either way, I've been sued, and yeah, that's been coming for some time, but $40,000, it barely makes a dent onto our finances, especially as, I can say this with confidence, by this point in the season, we are making profits. $374,000 profit we made at the last Grand Prix. Compare that to the Argentine Grand Prix where we made a smaller profit. Of course, the Brazilian Grand Prix we did make a slight loss because I was still doing testing. That's what it was, testing. And of course the Australian Grand Prix we made a massive loss, but at that point we were doing testing, extensive testing, and I think I manufactured a brand new car for our test driver, and we were running a VIP treatment. So yeah, it's no surprise I made a loss, and of course we had to fly all the way to Australia. We have finally got to the European part of the season where we are making big profits at every Grand Prix. Eddie Irvine will be racing for Jordan next season. Presumably replacing... Well, actually, I don't know. Because I don't know how long each of the contracts are with all the drivers, but I think it must be with Nakano. Let me check that, actually. Because I feel like Nakano... Oh, no, sorry, Tuero. No, Nakano's... No, Tuero. Well, they're basically the same, aren't they? They're both former Minardi paid drivers, yeah. Tuero, his contract runs out at the end of this season, so that means next season Jordan are going to have Jean Alesi and Eddie Irvine. That's a pretty decent driver lineup. The McLaren cars sounded incredibly smooth at the last race. Right, that is a new lead. We have finally got a new lead on the driver aid front. Good, I can stop. Actually, no, because I'm more... Well, no, actually, no, I'll look for it. Yep, I'll look for the... I guess that's... automatic gears? Is that a driver aid? Well, certainly it's a gears, a transmission one, so I'll look for that on the McLaren car. And you've got Peter Sauber, once again voted as the worst F1 manager. Jean Todt. That's interesting, actually, because I thought it would have been given to David Richards, the Benetton manager. Just on the basis that Frentzen won the Grand Prix. But they've given it to Jean Todt, which... Well, I'm in two minds, because I'm glad it's actually someone different. It's someone other than the manager of the driver which won the Grand Prix, but the amount of times Jean Todt has won Manager of the Month is sickening. I think he's won it more times than anyone else apart from Ron Dennis. Let's have a quick commercial update, although there's nothing for me to update you on the team sponsor front. Red Bull still don't want to know, we're not even allowed to talk to them. On the engine front, we're making good progress with the Mercedes-Benz deal. We're halfway to getting a partner deal. I could sign a customer deal, but look at that. $10.5 million, no thanks. On the tyre front, okay, right. We fulfilled the requirements to have a customer tyre deal, although for 2 seasons, actually that might be perfect. Yeah, because I think after 2 seasons' time, that will be exactly the sort of time in which we want a works tyre deal. So if we can secure a customer tyre deal for 2 seasons, not worry about it for a while, yeah, that's That's actually perfect, I suppose. Although, I am now relying on Goodyear to produce good tyres for the next 2 seasons. Although, even though I talked about the R&D and the cash, as I said, it is difficult to predict. The tyre war is random. On this game it is just completely random. So we're going to go with Goodyear. They've got the slightly higher R&D department. They've produced good tyres this season, although both the Bridgestone and Goodyear tyres this season are just better versions of what we had last year. So yes, I'm going to sign a 2-season customer deal with Goodyear, which is good. It's good to just, sign a multi-year deal. Even if it is a bad deal like this one, it just means we can free up our commercial department for the rest of this season and also next season. Because, the tyre deal is signed, sealed, sorted. So, let's head on over to the Circuit de Catalunya for the 1999 Spanish Grand Prix. Yet another overcast session in this video, so it's going to be yet another dry qualifying session. And again, I'm not expecting much. We still haven't fitted any upgrades onto the car, so let's see how well we do. And slightly better actually, Diniz beat presumably Marini. Yes, he did, by a quarter of a second, well, just less than. So let's focus down at the bottom end of the grid. Williams have definitely made a step forward because, well, Jacques Villeneuve was qualifying behind both Minardi guys. He's still behind his teammate, but both Williams drivers beat both Minardi drivers by half a second. So Williams are definitely slowly crawling their way back up the grid. Johnny Herbert in a Williams is still 7/10 of a second behind Takaki. Behind the slowest of our drivers, and Takaki is a further half a second back from Pedro Diniz. So we're still a good way ahead of Williams for the time being, but I am keeping an eye on Williams because I don't think Williams will get to the front by the end of the season. I don't even think they'll score a point this season, but I do think they could well overtake us this season. Anyway, Pedro Diniz moving his way up the grid, having beaten a Prost driver. So us, with our Ferrari engine, we have beaten a Mercedes engine driver. Anyway, moving back up towards the front, in fact actually, yeah, another half a second gap separating Hakkinen from Diniz. And moving up towards the front, Shinji Nakano. Shinji Nakano this time being the Sauber driver that impresses me. I don't know what's going on at Sauber. It's almost like both Sauber drivers are taking it in turn to pull out a good qualifying performance. But that's the thing, is Sauber, at the previous Grand Prix and this one, they've been impressive in qualifying, but in the race, nowhere. Although, if Shinji Nakano can score a point, that would be big news. I don't care if he's in a Sauber Mercedes. Shinji Nakano scoring a point would be something. I mean, Nakano's one of those drivers you forget about. I forgot what team he was in. I thought he was in a Jordan. Which actually, I guess, reflects worse on Tuero, because that means I forgot Tuero existed. Either way, Damon Hill has taken pole position for the 1999 Spanish Grand Prix. Wirtz yet again in second. Eddie Irvine in third, keeping up the good run of form for Benetton. Then you've got Michael Schumacher in fourth, Fisichella fifth, and Frentzen in sixth. And obviously, as I've already mentioned, Nakano in 7th. Shinji Nakano in the Sauber beat David Coulthard in the McLaren. In this episode, we're just flicking through different levels of dryness. We've got a very dry Grand Prix to look forward to. Low wind speed and 28 degrees out on track. Actually, no, that's 28 degrees air temperature, I'm assuming, not track temperature. Anyway, again, another Grand Prix not really to look forward to from my perspective. Well, not as a competitor, but as a spectator I am interested because Arrows, Ferrari, McLaren, Benetton, it's near impossible to call between those teams. It's not even a case of they're so closely matched. It's just a case of one Grand Prix, one will have the edge, then the next one, another one will have an edge. It's just impossible to predict which team is going to be the quicker one at which circuit, because they're all so close. Anyway, let's see how the 1999 Spanish Grand Prix finishes. Yet another race win for Arrows. In fact, it's better than that. Arrows have got a 1-2 finish. Alexander Wurz has won the 1999 Spanish Grand Prix with Jan Magnussen in second. Yes, Magnussen only beat David Coulthard in third. Yes, he only beat David Coulthard by less than a second, and he's 42 seconds behind his teammate, but don't let that take anything away from this race result. And Arrows 1-2 in 1999. David Coulthard in third, Frentzen fourth. Nakano! I said it would be big news if Nakano scored a point, and he scored 2 of them. Shinji Nakano for Sauber has scored 2 points. That's Sauber's first points of the season. And they come courtesy of Nakano. And then you've got Mika Salo for Tyrrell in 6th. Tyrrell have scored their first points in this career mode. Mika Salo in 6th for Tyrrell, that's big. Villeneuve beat Jarno Trulli, Hakkinen out with a gearbox issue, Rosset out with an engine issue, and Rosset, Minardi, they run Ford engines. That is yet another Ford engine reliability issue. Ford have got a very, very good engine, arguably the second best engine on the grid. All they need to do is tidy up the reliability. Because, yeah, okay, sure, it's cost Minardi a finish, but, you know, that doesn't really mean much. But as the last Grand Prix, Wurz retired. Who knows where we would have finished? Probably in the points, had he not retired. Ford, Arrows and Ford, that partnership, they are on the verge of doing something special. They already have, to be honest, but they could win both championships this season. But I don't think it's going to be the drivers that will let Arrows down. I think, if anything lets Arrows down, it's going to be Ford's reliability. Although clearly Ferrari's reliability isn't up to much because both Michael Schumacher and Takaki retired. Both for the same reason, both using the same engine. Well, the same base model anyway. I would assume that Ferrari have upgraded their own engine by this point in the season. And Damon Hill qualified extremely well, but out pretty much straight away. Well, I don't know what lap, but he was the first of many drivers to retire from this Grand Prix, and also the first of 4 drivers to retire from this Grand Prix with an engine issue. And the Mercedes engine, yes, we think of it as a powerhouse, but the Mercedes engine is also very reliable. It's as reliable as it is powerful. So whereas a Ford reliability issue is somewhat expected, a Mercedes reliability issue, that isn't what we should expect, and really, really disappointing for Damon Hill. This is one strange looking Drivers' Championship table, Alexander Wurz leading the way, which in of itself doesn't sound that strange. But then, you know, Wurz is in an Arrows, and then suddenly the whole thing becomes a lot weirder. This is only 1999. I mean, I could understand the game getting this weird a few seasons down the line, once, you know, the games had an opportunity to really mix things about. But for the running order to have changed that much in one season is extraordinary. Wurz, Hill, Frentzen, then Michael Schumacher in 4th, Coulthard, Jan Magnussen in 6th, Irvine 7th, Fisichella, Alesi, Nakano has scored 2 points, Mika Salo 1. Well, 7 teams have scored points already this season. After only 5 races in this 1999 season, Tyrrell have scored a point, and Arrows, not only are they leading the Drivers' Championship, but they're leading the Constructors' Championship. They're ahead of McLaren by 4 points, Benetton by 11, Ferrari by 15 points. Now, I'm unlikely to be successful with copying or complaining, but I don't really see why I would want to complain, because let's say I complain and we get both McLaren drivers disqualified from the previous Grand Prix. I mean, that would be mega. That would be some big news. I'm not sure if that can actually happen. I don't actually know what happens when you complain. I assume at least the driver aid gets revoked from McLaren, but what if they get disqualified from the previous Grand Prix? I mean, that would be big news. But I wouldn't really gain anything from it. Yes, Takaki would move up a couple of places, so would is. But it's not like we would score a point from it. Copying is extremely unlikely to work, but at least I would gain something from it, so let's try it. Yeah. No surprise there, absolutely no surprise there. And I can't complain about it now, I guess because it would seem hypocritical for me to try and copy it and then complain about it. Because, I'd just be... yeah, I'd be shooting myself in the foot there with the FIA, so... me and Ron Dennis, we're going to keep that as a collective secret. I'll keep a secret in return that he doesn't tell Max Mosley that I tried to copy his driver aid, his presumably illegal driver aid, because I would assume it hasn't been registered. No. Yes. Right, actually, good thing I didn't complain then, because it's perfectly legal. So then guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like, comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next episode, in which... well, actually, the next episode will be slightly different. I'm not even sure how, because there's two different approaches I'm thinking of for the next episode. But either way, the Monaco Grand Prix will be taking place in the next episode, and it's certainly a Grand Prix I'm looking forward to. So, I'll see you guys in the next episode.